Yes, we can start now. Yeah. A very good morning to everyone present here. We, the placement cell of HR College, are honored to welcome Ms. Yogja Singh, employer branding and talent acquisition expert at one of the best companies from travel and hospitality sector. Ms. Yogja Singh is a dynamic, result-focused HR leader with 15 years of experience along with strong decision-making and analytical ability. Ma'am, we are delighted to have you on board. Before we get started, I would like to introduce our principal, Dr. Pooja Ramchandani, whose expertise has always been our guiding light. I would now like to introduce Dr. Naveen Punjabi, Vice Principal of HR College and Director of the Placement Cell. All of us know him as a very enterprising and enthusiastic mentor with the vision to ignite minds and awaken hearts. Unfortunately, Naveen sir and Pooja ma'am had some last minute emergency and could not join with us today. The topic of today's Pulse session is how to appear for a group discussion. Ma'am, I would now request you to address the students present in this meeting with your insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kushi, and good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to interact with the Bright Young Youth at HR College. I'd just like to talk about this session. I'll keep it very short. The idea is to keep it as conversational as possible. And before I really kick off, I'd love to see some, responses in the chat as to what is your expectation from the session so that I can build that in case it's already not there. So, when you think about group discussions and you're looking at me briefing you about it, giving you insights, what is it you'd like to know about group discussions? You can use the chat icon and type in your inputs, please. Okay, so I've received a response from Aman. Aman says how to put your point forward in a better way. Great. That's a great start, Aman. Anybody else? Sakshi says how to be more confident while explaining your point. Dimple says being able to put forward your views professionally without being rude. How to clearly state your opinions on topics mentioned. All right, how GDs happen in reality. That's what Shruti wants to know about. And group discussions should be in a positive way only or both. That's what Mohit wants to know. Great. I think I do have answers to most of your queries. And, let's do a dipstick check towards the end of the session as to if you have answers to your queries. Otherwise, feel free to ask me those questions as well. I'm going to bring up my screen here. So I'm going to focus on, of course, what is a group discussion? What are the essential skills required for a group discussion? What are some of the do's and don'ts? And also, what are the prerequisites for a group discussion? Now, a group discussion is really a very purposeful, interactive process involving exchange of thoughts, ideas on any given topic. The type of topics that you can expect is anything ranging from current affairs, something which is absolutely, at times, there can be topics which are absolutely abstract, or they can be topics which are really, focused on what's happening, some certain specific economic issues, or, something that the current developments that are taking place. Now, what does the GD really assess? It is assessing your thought process. How do you really analyze a problem or an issue? And how do you make a point when it comes to, a team-based environment or while interacting with a group of people? How impactful are you? How do you convince them about your point of view? That's what is really assessed in a group discussion. I'll also talk about some of the other traits, and those will emerge when we know how we impactfully put our point across. So if I'm to look at, how you're prepping for a group discussion, in terms of your prep, typically, you're looking at reading. There is no shortcut to reading. It's a habit you should inculcate. You should be aware of current topics. You should be aware of what's happening in the sports domain, anything to do with arts, anything to do with economics, the economy, etc. And also, look, with reading, there's always a bonus, right? It always helps your communication skills. Then there is, again, no shortcut to practice. You need to work on your English, both verbal, non-verbal. You've got to focus on structuring your sentences well, the correctness, the grammatical correctness of your sentences, as well as the clarity with which you're putting forward your thoughts. You can always make a point, but if it's not very clear, you're going about and circumventing around the point, talking about a host of other things, but not directly addressing it or not clearly addressing it, then the essence of what you're trying to put across is lost. The third one, of course, is discussion itself. I'm sure, you've got groups, you've got friends, family also, you can do that. You can, have informal discussions on various topics, try articulating your thoughts. Nothing beats practice. The more you practice, you'll be able to articulate your thoughts well. Now, group discussion typically can range from anything between 10 to 15 minutes, right? The first 30 odd seconds of the first 1 minute is usually given to all participants to put their thoughts together on the topic of discussion. And generally it's advised that you have a pen and paper handy, whether it's a virtual one or an in-person one. Keep a pen and paper handy. Try and put down your points. Think about any stats around the points. Post which there's one person in the group who takes the lead in initiating the discussion. The initiator could be you if you know the topic well, followed by an exchange of ideas and eventually a summary of the discussion. Now, in all of this, throughout, there are observers, who are your assessors, who are observing you on various parameters, your communication skills, how you're putting your point across, clarity of thought, also at times the authenticity of your stats, how confident are you about those numbers, how participative are you in the group discussion. And if people are not participative enough towards the end, they can be asked to summarize the discussion, or alternatively, people volunteer to summarize the discussion. So that's basically what the structure looks like. I will talk about the nuances of a discussion in a virtual setting versus an in-person setting as well in the subsequent slides. Now let's talk about what are the essentials for a group discussion. Now what you see here are the skills that a panelist is looking for in a group discussion. Of course, knowledge of the topic is very, very important. So if you're reading, you know what's happening around you, then I think you're in a safe space. I will also talk about scenarios where, you don't know about the topic, because it's not humanly possible to know about everything, right? There are times when you would be caught unaware about a topic that you're not aware of, and or you probably did not read up about. So what do you do in those scenarios? I will tell you about that. Another important aspect is analytical ability. Now, what is analytical ability? It is really the ability to, try and see the topic from the lens of what are the pros, what are the cons, any stats that what is the outcome of it, how you're structuring it, also hearing other people out and, countering their thoughts or the facts that they're presenting with logic. This cannot be an ideology-based discussion. It always has to be a fact-based discussion. Please bear that in mind. Another important aspect is empathy. Now, empathy is a non-negotiable skill that everybody needs to have, and that's what most organizations assess. Whether they're assessing you in GDs or personal interviews, empathy is a very important trait for organizations. And how does empathy get reflected? It's about how you're able to bring the group together. Are you giving everybody an opportunity to voice their opinion? Are you patiently waiting for your turn? You're not cutting through someone or disrespecting someone. You're not laughing at their opinions or views that are coming in. Open to hearing them out, and you're at the end of the day respectful of everybody's space and thoughts, right? It can't be that you're nudging the other person next to you, sitting there, what nonsense are you talking, telling them that I don't agree with you. That can't be happening. So you have to be respectful of everybody's physical and mental space. And that's what's going to be, empathy, making sure that you understand, try and understand where the person is coming from without passing judgments. Problem solving and rational thinking skills, very important. So when a topic is given to you, you'll have to assess if it's an abstract topic, what is the lens you're taking. If you're, trying to look at it as a problem, then defining that problem and arriving at what could be a possible solution. If it's really about current affairs, then trying to understand, then broadly giving a context of what issues led to the topic at hand, what was the historical background, and what is the outcome of it, right? And again, then you bring in facts, figures, etc., but try and make your discussion very, very structured. Have an introduction, have some points that you can talk about in the midst of the discussion, and always have a concluding point that you want to make. Now, you cannot structure all of this at times in the beginning. Some of your thoughts will also shape up, as you hear others talking, and your interjections that you want to make, or your summary or the conclusion that you want to make, may keep getting modified. Hence, it's very important to listen to others when they're talking about it. In a GD, it's very easy to constantly just focus on the self and keep thinking about, okay, this is the next point I'm going to make. But you've got to pay attention to what others are saying, because there could be a chance that the point that you make may not even be related or logically in flow. So it's important to pay attention to what everybody else is saying, so that the point that you make is logical and fits in well. Interpersonal skills, I think I've covered that. So when you talk about empathy, some of your interpersonal skills will also come in. How are you greeting your other participants? How are you giving them a turn to participate? You're not interjecting them. Some of that's going to come handy. How are you sitting overall in the GD, whether it's a virtual one, or your body language, right? Or even in a physical form of a group discussion, your body language makes a lot of difference. At the same time, you know, uh, how are you basically addressing some of your team members? It can't be that you guys have friends in the group and you're addressing them by their, by different names which are not usually used, or whatever you call them in your friend circle. You've got to be very professional in a group discussion, and take their first name. And remember, taking someone's name makes a lot of impact. So it's important that you take a note of the names, or at least try and recall. It makes a lot of difference when you personally address someone with their names. The other is really flexibility or rigidity in accepting a viewpoint of others in the group. So for an assessor, it is very important to understand that, are you willing to adapt? Are you willing to adapt your thought process when someone's presenting a point? Are you willing to accommodate their views? Or are you, just on a one track path here, where you've decided that it's my way or the highway, and you're going on a rant where you're talking about I don't care what you say, but this is what I think. So that makes a difference. Please be accommodative, and that's why empathy, interpersonal skills, all of them come together to play a role. The other aspect of this is really listening and conceptualization ability. This I've talked about. It's very important to listen. It's very important to build the interjections or your thoughts or the points that you want to put across in the logical flow of the, instead of just randomly jumping on with a point which is absolutely correlated. This will also tell the assessor that how attentive have you been in the discussion. Have you been paying attention, or you've just been thinking, okay, this is the next point I need to make, I don't care what others are saying. Putting forth your ideas in an unbiased manner. So it's very important to try and think about a topic, think about any biases you may have. They could be topics which could carry biases. If, for instance, let's just say it's about a certain sport, between a match between two countries, or a certain type of sport where you think the other country would have better infrastructure, and there's an assumption that maybe developed countries don't have better infrastructure. So think about what biases could creep in. Try and make an unbiased point which is logical and factual. So try and support your the point that you want to make, your views, with facts. Do not, as I said, make them ideological in nature. There has to be a rationale why you are bringing a point forth, and it can't be simply just because I think or I believe this should be the case. That cannot be the scenario when it comes to group discussions. For instance, let me give you an example. If I am possibly talking about why should interviewers even conduct group discussions, while assessing students on campus, is that even a good strategy? Then I'm going to talk about some historical facts that, what have been the advantages of group discussions in the past when my organization has conducted GDs, what has been the success rate, how these people performed in the long run after being hired. So, I'm going to talk about some facts, and I'm going to bring that data and talk, share it with the group. The other is time management skills. This is very important. Please keep an eye on the clock. You can't be the only one speaking in a discussion. So in case anybody here believes that, if that you will be the only person speaking or you will not let others speak, please remember that does not work in your favor. It has to be participative in nature. You've got to give others a chance, but you've also got to be very crisp in the points that you make. So keep an eye out on the clock, put a timer if preferably, so that how much time do we have left. That will also give you time to pace out what you want to say, right? It can't be that you're talking about uh, you know towards the end of the discussion, you suddenly remember to put forward a point when you should be concluding, the discussion. So timing is very important. Time management is supremely important. So even when you're doing your practice discussions, put your timers, time yourself within 10 minutes, whether you're discussing with your friends, see how you do during the course of the discussions, because generally there are usually around 10 to 12 participants in a group discussion. So now imagine everybody would just, if everybody was to talk, then they would just get about a minute or two. So you will have to make the most impact in that limited amount of time. Now, there can be scenarios where the assessor just leaves the group, and the group decides who's talking and who's initiating, who's concluding, or the assessor gives an order to the group saying, let's go clockwise, and everybody talks. Right. So just remember, there can be both scenarios, but in the first scenario, it's equally important for you to time yourself. So that's about what are the skills that are being assessed in a group discussion. Let's talk about interpersonal communication, which I had mentioned more in detail. So really talked about, are you putting a logical point across? Is it sensible? Is it a sensible view that you're giving? The other is, can you put your point across with enough clarity? Are others able to understand it? How do you disagree? If there is someone who's presenting a point, but you have a different view, you can do that very politely. And I will talk about some of those aspects as well eventually. The other is, are you able to maintain your composure when the situation gets really tense? There can be some difficult participants in a group discussion. Somebody can possibly raise their volume, or somebody can be rude, but are you able to maintain your composure in that kind of a scenario? That becomes very, very important when it comes to interpersonal skills. So, if somebody is probably just being very, very rude, somebody is shouting or raising their voice, you can just, with a simple gesture say, excuse me, let's please stay cordial. Let's continue with the discussion. I hear you, but you've got to hear my views or the other person's views out as well. If you're disagreeing with someone, you don't have to be forceful about it. You can just smile. You can say, I hear you, but I have a different view, and let me express it. The moment you smile, that does a lot of things. It suddenly puts a person a step back, because now they see someone who's very, very affable, amicable, and they also start reassessing if it's a good idea for them to be rude or very, very pushy in the discussion. So try it. It works beautifully well. When you're in a difficult scenario, somebody is not listening to you, you want to disagree with them, just smile and tell them that I hear you, but I would appreciate if you can give me some time to hear me out as well. Also, in the GD, it is very important, at times there's people who take the lead. Some people can basically, talk about being leaders in the sense that they initiate the discussion and they make sure that everybody is getting a fair chance to speak. The other is facilitating the discussion, so which is almost the same thing. You're making sure that everybody in the group has an equal chance to put their point across. So, if you think that someone's just talking and not allowing others to put their point of view, or is being very, very aggressive, you can check them. You can say that, you've spoken for some time. Let's give the other person next to you an opportunity to speak. Take their name and, give them a chance. And you can also request someone to summarize the discussion. So those are some of the important aspects of interpersonal communication. And another important thing is really, your body language. So you're coming across as aggressive, you're coming across as someone who's too submissive. So whether you're slouched on your chair or you're just nervously shaking your leg, or, just going on with your pen, picking it on the notebook, that gives a lot away about you. It tells you there's a lot of nervous energy, right? So please make sure you do deep breathing, take a few deep breaths, Just focus on listening to others, and remember that, what's really important is that you come across as a good listener and are able to put your points across impactfully and are empathetic. Those are the three things that will really help you sail through the group discussion. Moving on to really what are some of the do's and don'ts of a group discussion. Some of the do's here are listening carefully. I've talked about that. When the GD is about to start, make sure you put your thoughts down, because when you're thinking that you have a mental checklist, it can get very confusing. You can forget points. So make sure that you use the first 30 seconds or 1 minute to actually put your thoughts down, so that at least whatever you want to say is there, and then you can decide whether you want to say, give away all of it during the course of the discussion, keep some points back, use some points when you hear counters coming in, etc. The other is, if you're thorough with the topic, then you don't really miss a chance of speaking up. So if you know the topic well, make sure that you find time and space to talk about it. Keeping quiet is not a solution, or thinking that somebody is going to come and nudge you to give opportunity. No. Try and make space when, if you want to interject someone, again, just tell them, hi, I have a point to make. Allow me a minute to say what I need to, and then we'll also hear you out. The other is, like I said, support your points with enough examples, quotes, real life, scenarios, any facts that you have. It's also important to have eye contact in this scenario. So, whoever you're talking to in the group discussion, if it's in a physical classroom setting, you've got to look at the person. It can't be that you're looking somewhere else and you're making a point to them. And a lot of students do this. When they're talking, they look at the assessors instead of people in the group. That doesn't get you any brownie points. You're not addressing the assessor. This is meant to be a group discussion. You're addressing each other. So please make sure that you're not looking at the assessors, but you're looking at your co-participants in the group discussion, and you're talking to them. The other is looking at the camera. It becomes if it's a virtual scenario, it can't be that you're looking somewhere else again and you're not looking at the camera when you're presenting your inputs. So make sure you do that. Also, in a virtual scenario, it's important that you check your audio video. Make sure you're in a well lighted room, and you have stable internet connection. Do a testing in advance so that you don't face a problem. Some of those are basic do's and do's when it comes to a virtual group discussion. The next is, of course, making sure that you're logical and coherent in your approach. So make sure that you structure your thoughts well, and you don't randomly come up with points. Oh, now I remembered this, let me say this, and then later again you remember something and you say that. That's why it's important that you write your thoughts down, decide on what are the important things that can probably fit in at the beginning, what could be something that could fit in the middle, and what could be points that could come in towards the end. If you have it written down, it will help you structure your content and your approach. The other thing I talked about is really being an active participant. So there are no shortcuts. You've got to speak. You can't keep quiet and think that, oh, I'll sail through. That doesn't happen. So you've got to, find avenues to put across your point during the course of the discussion. Listening, I've talked about. I've also talked about maintaining a professional body language and etiquettes. So make sure, even if it's a friend next to you, you can't be, nudging them or tapping them on the shoulder in a physical scenario and asking them that, let me say something, you've talked enough. That can't be happening. You should be very professional. You should take their name and say, all right, you made a point. Can I now, share my inputs? So those are some of the do's of a GD. I'm going to talk about some don'ts now. So if you don't know the topic well, it is advisable that you don't initiate the topic. Now, if you don't know the topic, wait for others to talk. That may give you a perspective. And then, you may be able to structure some thoughts which are coherent and logical and put your point across. But my suggestion is don't wait till the end also, thinking, okay, now let me listen to everyone and I will only summarize. That doesn't help. So maybe the first 2-3 people, hear them out. That'll give you some idea of what the topic is, what they're talking about, and what flow you can give to your thoughts, and then you can start pitching in. The other is, do not overspeak, intervene, or just grab someone else's chance to speak. Be polite, find a polite way of doing it instead of just being overbearing on others. Uh, Next is condemning someone very severely, or criticizing them for their viewpoint is an absolute no-no in a group discussion. So, like I said, if you think that there's someone who is giving a view which you completely don't agree with, just smile and say, I do not, well, I hear you. However, I have a different view. I don't agree with what you're saying. And then, give a rationale. Here's why I don't agree, right? The other is, so basically, don't be dismissive, right? That's what I'm saying. And the next one is being restless and jittery when someone counters your points. So it's a group discussion. There will be counterpoints. That does not make you any less of a person. Hear them out, put your points across, and just take a few deep breaths. If you're feeling nervous, you're feeling jittery, keep some water at hand, take a sip, but make sure that you don't lose your flow of thought in the whole process of being restless and jittery. Uh, your body language and how you pay attention makes a lot of difference. So it could either tell the assessors that you're lacking energy, or you have just the right energy level in the group discussion. So make sure you're sitting upright, make sure you're taking people's names while speaking to them, maintaining eye contact, and you have the right modulation when you're talking and the right volume when you're talking. If you're not too loud or you're not speaking in a very low volume. Personal biases I've talked about, keep them out. You may come from a certain background which may shape up your perspective, our upbringing. All of these play a very important role in shaping up biases. And believe you me, there's no human being who's immune to biases. I have biases, I'm certain so do you. We have to be just conscious of those biases and remember that the idea of a group discussion is purely putting a point of view with facts and figures across, and just making a point. But it's not some, the idea is not to question your own ideology or beliefs. So keep that out of a group discussion. It's good to mention stats, but if you don't know any, then please refrain from cooking up statistics or mentioning anything erratic. Your assessors are smart people. If they've given you a topic, they've already done their homework about it. So, and that's true for any abstract topic, right? If an abstract topic comes to you, you give it a certain flavor based on your thoughts and what interpretation you have of it, and then you start throwing stats. Make sure that you know your stats well and they're logical. The other is, I think I've already made that point around making sure that you don't enter your neighbor's private space. No nudging, no tapping on the shoulder, and not even turning around and, telling them, what are you doing in this GD? Let me talk. That doesn't happen. So please make sure that you don't do any of that. And even in a virtual scenario, please stop pinging them. If, they're on some platforms, stop sending them direct chats, etc., to distract them. Make sure that you just focus on how you can get your point across. So those are some of the don'ts. Let's look at what are some of the prerequisites for a group discussion. So I've talked about knowledge. So I've talked about really reading well, making sure that you read about very varied topics, whether it's sports, art, literature, current affairs. Just make sure you have a generally high level of awareness. And I noticed a typo in that slide. Please ignore that. The other aspect here is if you lack knowledge, as then you cannot speak fluently, just wait for others to talk, frame your thoughts, and go on. The other is data crunching. So it's very important that while you're reading, how do you recall data? Now, it can't, unless, of course, you have a superhuman memory. It's always advisable that you maintain a sheet of varied topics, you maintain stats there, you can always revisit them so that your stats are, you don't end up mixing up your stats or quoting those stats incorrectly. Generally, data or stats make a good impression on assessors, but the correct ones and not erratic ones. Communication skills, I've talked about. Make sure that whatever you say is meaningful, you give others an opportunity. You also basically maintain your overtones, right? You're not too loud, you're not too low when you're speaking, and you're articulating your point well. Most importantly, really here is the third point. Seek not only to be understood, but most importantly, understand what the other participants are trying to say, and always have an open mind to others and what they're saying. Uh, Either you concede to another's viewpoint or you find a common ground with them, but make sure that you approach GD with an open mind. There is nobody here who has a personal vendetta against anyone. Everybody is just trying to participate. Everybody is trying to put their best foot forward. They're trying to showcase whatever knowledge they have. So discount, some people in case they go overboard. And you can always politely check them and say that I think you're speaking too loudly. If I would appreciate if you can lower your volume. There's no harm in doing that. There's no damage. But I think what's really more damaging is either not checking someone when they're talking like that, or you yourself are talking like that, right? So please be mindful about some of those aspects. Talked about body language, facial expressions, body gestures are very important. Eye contact is important. Now, you can't be flapping your hands throughout, violently gesturing. That's very, very distracting, right? And they can also be limited space in a classroom setting. At times, rooms are crammed up, right? So please make sure that even if you have to use hand gestures, those are delicate movements and you're not encroaching on anyone's personal space. At the same time, I've talked about smiling. If you really have to disagree with someone, just smile and go ahead and disagree with them. Your tone should also match the intensity. It can't be that you are disagreeing with, or you're really convinced about a point, but you're not talking very confidently about it, right? Or you have very strong facts to support what you're saying, but you're not energetic enough in putting that across. So you've got to sync up. You've got to sync what you're saying with the intensity with which you're talking. There has to be conviction when you're talking. Another important aspect is listening skills. It's important. It's very difficult. All of us basically seek to be heard, but we don't want to listen. So it's important that you start developing listening skills. Start with your friends and family. Hear them out what they're trying to say. Keep your biases aside to understand the underlying meaning of what they're trying to say. And if you listen carefully, that's when you will be able to actively participate. Mindfulness is very important. And that's when you will be able to put the right point across and logically also structure the flow. So active listening, like I said, helps you if you don't know the topic. You're paying attention to what others are saying. It'll help you get some ideas. It'll help you formulate your thoughts and then deliver those thoughts. Cooperation is important. Most organizations always have team projects unless the out and out individual contributor role. At times, even in individual contributor roles, you do have to liaise with other teams to get your work done, right? So which means that this is where cooperation becomes very important in a professional scenario, and that's where assessors are always trying to evaluate you. As for them, it's important that you're able to get along well with others, agree to disagree with them, find that common ground, and at the same time are able to take a very holistic view of the problem statement, right? Instead of just, having a very myopic view and not uh, willing to, hear others out or really understand what they're trying to say. So cooperation is very, very important. Last but not the least, summarizing. Now, summarizing is an absolutely great way to get the interviewers or the assessors' attention. It does not mean that you just jump into the summary. You've got to have a build up to the summary. Either you volunteer that you summarize, or if you're playing the facilitator role as well along with being a participant, then you can say that so we've discussed this, it's time to conclude, let me share a quick summary of the discussion. And that's where active listening becomes very important, because when you're sharing a summary, what is really important is you're highlighting the key points that were discussed, and those key points were not coming from you only. Please remember that there were others who were making key points as well. So you've got to cover all aspects. That will tell the interviewer how attentive, assessor how attentive you were. The other aspect is keep your summary short and crisp. Nobody's looking at hearing an essay, right? So you've got to keep your points very, very short and script. There's some people who have these fillers they use. I'm thinking, and hold on, I will just look at my notes and then summarize. That doesn't work. So you've got to have your points crisply written down. You've got to make sure that you're extremely articulate about it. Say, this was the topic. These are the three things we discussed. So and so made these points. And this is where we are at this point of time in the discussion. And this is how we concluded it. Also, a summary has to be an amalgamation of all sides of the discussion. So, like I said, make sure that you factored in everybody's point of view and you're not adding any new points. Please don't treat a summary as a way to make another point, or make another interjection that, oh, I forgot to mention this in the beginning. Let me summarize and add my new point here. That doesn't work. A summary is literally what just happened. You cannot be adding new points to the summary. If you make a new point, that will not go down well with your assessors, because they're not looking at new points. They're really paying attention to how well you're facilitating, how well you're paying attention to what everybody was saying, and how well can you articulate it all. So that's a quick input on summarizing group discussions. I'm going to pause and stop sharing my screen. I'd love to now interact with you all and hear you out. If there are any queries, observations, you want to disagree with me, I'd be happy to, also take those views. After all, this is a group discussion where I've talked enough. I'm going to let others also now put in their points. So please feel free to either unmute yourself, ask a question, or type in your queries out here. So Aman's asking how to handle a situation where a group discussion is turning into a debate. So Aman, those are some of the techniques that I talked about. One is you've got to tell the person where it's becoming a debate. You've got to smile and tell them that I heard you. However, I have a different point, and this is what I have to say. And towards in the summary, you can identify that there were 5 people who spoke in favor of the topic. However, there were another 5 that were not in favor, and these were the 2 views that emerged. So there, it can become a debate clearly, because there will be people who will take a stand or a certain view, and you cannot always avoid such a scenario. But what's important is how you structure your thoughts, how you agree to disagree with people, or you find that common ground. You look at the nuances of how you're expressing your disagreements. Are you being cordial? Are you sharing enough facts to support your arguments to others? So those are some of the important aspects that become very important in this scenario as well. I hope that answers your question. Rishi's question is, what if someone's used the same point you were about to proceed with? Well, Rishi, I think given if it's, let's just say there are certain topics, especially current affairs, right? If everybody is reading and the information is coming from the same sources, there is a high likelihood that everybody would have common points. But I'm sure that, when you put your thoughts down about the topic in the first 30 seconds to a minute, it's not just any one thought about the topic, right? There will probably be about 4 or 5 points. So think about, they can be 2 scenarios here. If somebody's already made the point that you wanted to make, can you add a fact or a figure to it in support of this topic or the argument or the point that they've made? So you can say, I agree, and interestingly, X number of people in India possibly are experiencing this issue. So you add a stat to it to reiterate that. That will tell the assessor that, okay, you know about this, you've done your homework. The other is find a complementary point to make, right? When you go ahead, think about what could be logically next in the flow. So add another point, but do not let this fetter your effort in the group discussion. The other question that's coming up here is by Mudit. So Mudit says that if we don't know about the topic and even then we want to speak, how should we move forward? So Mudit, you don't want to ever initiate such a group discussion. So you can't be the first person talking about it. Suggest you wait for a few others to talk about it. That will give you a perspective of what lens are they wearing, what is their view of it. It'll give you some ideas to structure your thoughts and make a point. That's what you can do. So, and also listen very attentively to what they're saying, so that, eventually what you can say about the topic when you don't know it too well. Khushi is asking if the GD is in person, then are we allowed to take notes, note things down during the GD in order to summarize at the end, because it is not possible to remember all the top points? Yes, Kushi, of course, you're allowed to do that. That's why, always carry a pen and paper with you. You're not just noting your thoughts down during the first 30 seconds or a minute, but you're also taking note of what are the points that were made. So just make sure that you time yourself well. It can't be that, all your time goes in taking those notes and you forget to, talk about your viewpoints in the group discussion. So either you note down keywords that will help you recall, what the other person has said, and, will help you summarize the discussion. So Jigyasa says eye contact induces anxiety. Jigyasa, I think that's why you will have to practice. If you do not have eye contact, it is also going to be interpreted as a sign of nervousness. So your confidence, how assertive you are, the conviction you have about the topic, a lot of that gets conveyed when you make eye contact, right? So if you're very thorough with the topic, you should not hesitate. It might make you nervous, and that's something you will have to work on. Practice with your friends, or maybe ask for a group of volunteers, because friends are people that you're comfortable with. Maybe you're used to looking at them and talking, but I'm sure there are plenty of other people, or there are groups that you don't interact with as much. Go to them, tell them, is it okay if we practice together? But make sure that you look at the person, make eye contact and talk. Otherwise, it doesn't work in your favor. Also, in a formal office setting, you cannot be looking anywhere else when you're addressing a person and talking to them. That again does not go well as a personality type. Okay, so Priyanshu is saying, who do you consider a good GD candidate? I think Priyanshu, a good GD candidate is someone who has the right body language, someone who is basically articulating their thoughts in a logical flow. Now, and I, as an assessor, will have no way of knowing whether you know the topic or you don't know the topic. It's really how you're timing yourself. If you're picking up cues, if you're listening to others, you can also get some facts in and, share those. The other is, are you being a facilitator or a leader? Are you, helping others? But please remember that unless you've practiced being a facilitator and or a leader for a group discussion, do not, start with it, because that may take up a lot of your time and you might forget to, interject. So please be mindful that you practice enough. And I think most importantly, someone who's also willing to accept a different point of view, and at the end of the group discussion is summarizing very crisply. So pretty much all that I've talked about, especially in the do's and the prerequisites for a group discussion, are constituents of an ideal group discussion candidate for me, or a good candidate for me. Kinjal's question here is, while preparing for a group discussion, how should we start with it? Like, there are a number of things that can be a topic. So where to start with? The newspapers, and the magazines. So you're looking at reading, making sure that you know what's going on in terms of current affairs. Look at your business today's outlooks, etc., to understand what are the perspectives floating around on current affairs, economist, right? And at the same time, generally, there are a lot of apps that are now available to summarize topics or give you viewpoints. So make sure you have your hands on with that. That's a good starting point to know. And make sure that when you're reading current affairs, you're also covering a varied set of topics. It's not just political in nature. You're looking at what's happening in the field of arts, what's happening in the field of sports, what's happening generally, out there when it comes to development of the country. So make sure that you're reading about broad-based topics, right? And not any one topic. That's what you can do. Mohit says, should we always speak in one side? That is, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree, or we should talk about both the sides. Mohit, that really depends if you have content for both the sides. If you do, you'll have to find a way to very tactfully switch. You can say that, while one viewpoint is this, and I agree with it, I also don't disagree with the other viewpoint, which is emerging because of X, Y, Z facts, right? So you can always put that across. You're not being judged for really trying to defend your point or not defend your point. uh, what you're being judged is on the delivery of your point and how well you're supporting it with arguments. The other aspect is, can this PPT be shared? I'd be happy to share that, Aman. That's not a problem. Tushar is asking, is it a good thing to say as stated by the following candidate and start a discussion? So that really depends on what context, Tushar, you're stating it. If you are building on that point of view, then of course you refer to it. Or if you are countering that point of view or want to differ from it, you can refer to it. Or you can say that, great, we've now heard so and so. Here's what I have to, or, I'd like to share my views now. So that's what you can do. So the prelude to really what is it that you want to do is important, right? So if think about those scenarios, and then you can decide whether you want to start with saying as stated by so and so. Because if you want to make a completely independent point, then as stated by so and so does not help you. So you will always have to build a segue into your point, right? And then decide how you're going to just basically put that transition across. uh, Okay, Pranjal's question is, if two people, if two, okay, so basically if two people at the same time want to summarize. So, Pranjal, I think that should be okay. You probably check with the person that, is it okay if I go first? Or, maybe you can talk, you can divide it. You can, tell them, why don't you talk about the first, half or the first 5 minutes of the discussion, and I'll talk about the second half of the discussion. You can do that. Or what you can do is you can let them summarize, hear them out. If you think there's anything that has been missed out, you can say, great, thank you for summarizing. Also just wanted to add that we also discussed XYZ things. Or if they've really summarized it well, appreciate it. Say, that was a great summary. You've covered all aspects, right? Vipul here says, can we say as said by an expert or someone else's opinion outside the group? Vipul, you can say that, but make sure that, you're not fabricating it. It's authentic. And you also know the expert's name, right? Because it can't be that someone somewhere said this. So you've got to be very sure of what you're quoting. And it adds a lot more credibility, right? When you take someone's name, say it's a, famous economist, or you'll say Amartya Sen said this, right? So you've got to make sure that you're very specific in references. And Tushar, yes, as I indicated, I will share this deck. That's not a problem. So I think, anybody else, any other questions?
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, the point that you talked about summarizing. So, what is the case, right? Like, if we are in an interview over there, and if we want to summarize, the interview tells us to summarize, or we have to take the initiative and tell everyone that I am going to summarize.
So they can be both the scenarios, right, Satyam? There are scenarios where the assessor will ask you to summarize, right? Now, generally, when the assessor asks anyone to summarize, that is coming from a point of view of either people who've not contributed enough, and they're wanting to see and understand their thought process. So they'll ask people who've not spoken enough to summarize. Or the third is they found someone really strong and well, during who's performed really well, and they thought they can really summarize well. But so that's scenario one. The second scenario is that, you can raise your hand. You can say that, now that we're approaching, that's where you keep an eye on the clock also. You can say that now that we're approaching time, it will be a great idea to conclude, and ask the assessor, is it okay if I summarize? Right? So it's a good idea to always ask them. Take the permission to say, I hope it's okay if I quickly summarize the discussion. And you're not just seeking permission from the assessor, seek it from the others also, so that they know that it's time to stop talking and not present a view. Otherwise, what can happen is you want to summarize, someone else is, interjecting you with another point that they want to make.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Also, ma'am, I would like to ask that the point you said that we can tell someone like you are being rude or let me speak. And the what do you think that saying this will affect them as a person? Like they will think that why are you telling me this? And even the interviews, how will they think of it?
So, Satyam, you can't control other people's reactions, right? The only thing you control is how you're feeling, how you're doing, and how you're reacting. Now, in a scenario where someone's being really rude, and that's a consistent pattern you've noticed to you and to others, then I think it's a good idea to check the person and they're not letting you speak at all. So, you do that, but you're always doing that politely and with a smile on your face. So, that lets the other person also take a step back. The other is the assessor would actually have a positive view of it because they are now seeing you as an individual who can handle a difficult conversation or a difficult scenario and does not get jittery or does not take a step back or withdraw from the scenario, right? And even at work that happens. There are difficult conversations that you need to have. You work with so many people. Personally, I have experienced that. You go ahead and since you're working with multiple teams, there are disagreements. There's somebody who's going to disagree to a timeline that you're giving them because they already have deliverables. And some people may be working under a lot of pressure. So there could be a chance that, that they're probably being very curt to you or not probably putting things across the right way. So that's why you can tell them that, look, I hear you. Uh, I don't think this conversation is going in the right way right now. And let's talk when you're in a better state of mind or so that's what you do in a work related scenario as well. And this is a group discussion, so you can always tell them that I've heard, I hear you, but I beg to differ, and let's also hear my point as well as what others have to say about that topic. So it'll just give the assessors an idea of how you do deal with pressure and difficult scenarios. Welcome. Aman is saying that can being too diplomatic be construed as one not standing their ground and not having a definitive take on the topic? So, I mean, that really diplomacy depends in it's very contextual in nature, right? I don't think diplomacy really means that especially when you're supporting it with logic, right? So that's not diplomacy. That does not get construed as diplomacy. Uh, I think diplomacy really comes in. Diplomacy goes a long way actually in helping you out. Wade through troubled waters. But at the same time, just make sure that you are giving a rational explanation for or a justification to someone for your diplomacy. You don't come out right and say, oh, I'm being diplomatic because so and so, but you give it via your views. You say that, I've heard this part, this side of the argument. Now I've heard this side of the argument. Here is what I feel is our common ground. So you're basically acting as a mediator more than being diplomatic in this scenario. Then Tushar has a question here. Is it a good thing to state that it's becoming a debate and we should refrain from doing that? So Tushar, I don't know if that may be the right scenario at this point of time because it really depends. I mean, if there is a topic where people are taking to and fro view, then there is no harm. I mean, unless the interviewer is interjecting that it has become a debate. A debate can also be a discussion at times, right? I mean, there will be views that will be pro, there will be views that will be con. But what's really important is that as long as people are not, making it like a disruptive classroom where people are yelling at the top of their voices, not allowing others to speak, that's what, if the decorum is not getting impacted. And to be honest, taking a call on what's becoming a debate and when would really be the assessor's call more than the participants call. Some assessors deliberately give topics which require people to take a pro and a con view of aspects. Sometimes they even divide the group like that. Satyam's question, while summarizing, should we stick to the view that we were speaking, or we should say that it was both pros and cons are discussed in the discussion, discussed in this discussion? So, Satyam, a summary includes an amalgamation of all aspects, right? So it can't be just your view or your side of the view, anybody who is talking, or siding with you. It will have to be, if it was a debate like discussion, then it'll have to be both pros and cons, because you're covering what everybody had to say largely as a group, right? That would include pros and cons. Never make the mistake of just expressing or sticking to the view that you had, because that will only give the assessor a one-sided story. Look, a summary is not an argument in defense of your points. A summary is simply nothing but just a collation of all that was discussed to refresh the assessor's memory and everybody's memory, that today's topic was this. We discussed some members here were for the topic, some were against. The for arguments were these and the against arguments were these. So always remember to give that holistic view in a summary. And please avoid thinking of summary as a personal viewpoint sharing window. That's not true. Somebody is simply just putting it all together. So it's important to have all views and all aspects covered. Anybody else? So I'm conscious of the time as well. In case there are no other queries, then we can wrap up the session. Happy to take up your queries at a later stage. Please do your placement team. I'd be happy to address them separately. I do know that your placement season is also going to start soon, so wish you all the very best. I'm quite certain that you all will excel in the session. I hope you found the session meaningful. And please just feel free. I'm available on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me at any point of time. I'm also happy to have one-on-one coaching for individuals, students who are looking at preparing, subject to, of course, me also finding the time. That may always not always be possible, but whenever I can. So happy to have this conversation. Happy to generally, help out wherever I can. So please do go ahead, and I'll also share my LinkedIn profile. Happy to connect with you there. Putting it in the chat window here for everyone present.
Yeah. On behalf of the placement cell of HR College, I would like to formally thank Ms. Yogja Singh for conducting this insightful session and engaging with the students. It was very informative and helpful. I would also like to extend our vote of thanks to our principal, Dr. Pooja Ramchandani, for all the support and guidance. Dear students, request you to fill the feedback form. The link is present in the chat box. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Yogja.
Thanks everyone. All the best. Bye.